Good to see so many familiar faces. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to just be filling the air at first. This is I'm not saying anything important at the moment. I'll let you know when I start saying anything that means anything, because right now we're just going to just let people feel like they're not coming into an empty room. You never want to be first at a party, right? It's like that kind of feeling. So we'll slowly let people join and give it a couple of minutes before we get started into the full program. And we hope you enjoyed the short films. And I guess I'll start telling you about the closed captioning, which is on the bottom of the screen. If you click on your closed captioning option, and access that. So that's closed captioning that we're doing live. Thank you to Lauren, who's doing that for all of these events all day today. And I see people are slowly joining in, so I'll give it a couple more minutes before we start. I'll also show you, for those of you who have been joining many of the conversations, you might see that we switch it up a little bit and we're trying out different methods with this. And today we are using the Brady Bunch method, where as opposed to the webinar where you are not seen, here you can be seen. And you can take the time now actually to flip through the screens here to see all your friends if you are in gallery view. Though I do recommend, highly recommend, once the conversation starts to switch into speaker view, which is on the top right, and that will let you see the individual speakers so they don't get lost on these big screens. I mentioned the closed captioning. As far as questions in this format, we're actually tonight going to try to ask our questions live. You are welcome to ask your questions if you don't want to speak through the chat, which is on the right. I would wait towards the end of the Q&A to add those questions just to make sure that these are questions that are that have not been asked already. But otherwise, if you would like to ask a question, what you can do is go to participants, and there you can raise hand. I just raised my hand. I don't know if people see that. I see that on the version. And then once your question is asked, you can lower your hand, but keep it up until we get to you. We'll contact you. We'll let you know you're going to be up next. Keep aware, of course, if we contact you through chat or through any other methods, that would be easy enough for you to ask questions. Cool. And I think we're ready to get started with introducing our panel and the program. So welcome to the ReelAbilities Film Festival. Welcome back. It's been a day. This is the third shorts program of the day. I've been saying all day that shorts films, for especially, I think in general, are always great, but especially for a disability film festival, short films are sometimes our strongest films, because a lot of the films that don't have the capacity to be made in a feature format might be able to be made in a short format, and we definitely get more submissions of shorts, and really some of the top programs come out of there. I want to give a big thank you to our partners, and we thank all of our partners for the entire festival, and check out our partner page on the ReelAbilities New York website. But we also try to mention a few that are associated with the films that you just saw. So there's Music for Autism, Adaptability, Rise and Resist, A Very Special Place, Disabled Sports USA, United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, Team Reeves, I'm going to mention as well, who we mentioned the other night. And I'll also mention SAG-AFTRA, who have been amazing partners and supporters over the years, and are supporting us again this year. I also want to mention all the films that you just saw. What It Feels Like, Fort Irwin, Whole, Revel in Your Body, and Positive All the Way. And we're really happy to have speakers here from 4 out of 5 of the films. They're coming from all around the world, which is one of the benefits of this format, is that we get to bring people together from really all different corners of the world. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce, I'll go according to the order that I have here, which is, first of all, Steven Fraser, who is the director of What It Feels Like. Thank you, Steven. Steven, give a wave, say hi, so people know to associate. This is the time, by the way, to get off of the gallery mode and go into the other option. Then we have the director of Fort Irwin, Quinn Else. Quinn, thank you.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We have the two subjects from Revel in Your Body, Laurel Lawson and Alice Sheppard. I guess we'll start with Laurel. Say hi. And our good old friend who I think has not missed a ReelAbilities in at least 5 years, Alice Sheppard. Thank you, Alice.
Hi.
And then we have Gil Goletski from Whole. Hi, Gil.
Hi. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you all. Thank you all for the wonderful films. I'm also going to take a moment before we get started, also just to acknowledge where we are and the time that we are in. And although ReelAbilities is running, keeping people engaged during this pandemic, of course, this is a tragic time for our country and the world and our city, and our hearts and thoughts are there with everyone who's affected by this, and that I think really means absolutely everyone. And with that, I think we're ready to jump into our Q&A, and I'm going to start by asking all of you the same question. If you could take a moment to introduce yourself and to tell us what was the inspiration behind your film. And I'm going to start with Quinn from Fort Irwin.
Hello, everyone. This is Quinn. I made Fort Irwin as part of my MFA project at the American Film Institute. So it's like a graduation film for the film directing program there. And before that, I had met an American man who was actually an animation professor of mine, who told me that he had paid to go to grad school by dressing up as a Iraqi villager in US Army simulations from like 2005 to 2008. And so I discovered the world of US Army training. So Fort Irwin, which the film is, the film's called Fort Irwin, but Fort Irwin's a real place. It's about 3 hours outside of Los Angeles. And they've built entire fake villages that look like Afghanistan and Iraq, where they train US Army soldiers year round. And so as I was researching this real place, I discovered that they hire amputee actors to play casualty role players. So, you know, when soldiers have to practice applying a tourniquet to someone who's lost a limb, they'll hire an amputee actor and put them into makeup. And then I learned on top of that that they will occasionally hire actors who are former veterans to reenact the injuries that they actually lived and sustained in combat. So it just seemed like a very dramatic and bizarre and extreme story. So I was very curious about that. And then I met a couple veterans who had gone through that experience, and they told me it was a positive experience for them in terms of confronting their PTSD. So I took all those lessons I had talking to them and tried to integrate it into the story.
Fabulous, and we'll get into that a little bit more soon. Let me move on to Steven Fraser for What It Feels Like.
Yeah, so with What It Feels Like, I went to investigate like voice hearing because it's something that I've experienced myself, but not in a really like an intrusive way. It's more just like under stress, like I'd hear voices, and I found that quite interesting. So I found a couple of support groups in Scotland that for people who just experience similar things, but they talk about their experiences and how it's not intrusive on their lives. So I just wanted to investigate that and think about how we could represent that in film. So I came up with the idea of the little animation boxes, which are like flip books, and mainly because they're like things which you can hold and things that feel real. Because all the people in the support group, they mentioned the fact that, you know, the voices are real to them, but they're not actually real in the real world. So I like the idea of these boxes being real things people could hold. So from there, yeah, I just thought I'd make a really short documentary using this weird type of animation that kind of showed how voice hearing can be a personal thing for people, but not necessarily be a negative thing. It can just be something that you can live with.
Thank you. And now I'd like to move over to Laurel to tell us a little bit about Revel in Your Body.
So Revel in Your Body came about through some really amazing collaborations when Kinetic Light was working with Georgia Tech, one of our tour venues for Descent. The presenter there was able to connect us with Safety Third Productions and our director for Revel, Catherine Helen Fisher, who had some really incredible ideas about how to film movement. From there, let's say that there's something of a trope in dance where dancers are often photographed using trampolines. And someone might have felt it was too dangerous for dancers in wheelchairs to do this. So Alice, being Alice.
Alice, you want to take the story from here?
So it was the wildest thing ever. I mean, the idea was that we were going to somehow make something in 2 days that was going to be put on a jumbotron for a football game in like under a week's time, and it was all going to be this sort of like wild thing that happened, really spur of the moment, kind of radically. And then we got to Georgia Tech, and we were like, you know, this is going to be something very different, and it's going to grow, and it's going to take its own life. But then we realized, you know, we hadn't actually, how does this happen? So there was a lot of YouTube to see, you know, what could we learn about wheelchairs and trampolines. And then there was the getting of a trampoline. No one would allow us to practice. Like, I called several places that had trampoline programs, and they were like, you're going to do what on a trampoline on my facility with a wheelchair? No. So literally someone from Good Night, Lisa Niedermeyer, just went down to Walmart, I think, and like grabbed the nearest trampoline that she could get hold of, and we set it up on the Georgia Tech campus, and we were like, we're either gonna live or we're gonna die, but it'd be a good way to go, maybe. And there we went.
This is classic Alice, by the way. So we practiced one day, the film crew flew in the next, and Revel was filmed in one day.
Nice. Were there, I just have to ask, were there any injuries?
Totally. I completely wrecked my toe. It was like bleeding like a nightmare, but not from the trampoline. It was because I just stubbed it in the course of every day moving around.
The dance scene around in this concrete parking deck, if you see the kind of work Alice and I do, asphalt is not the best surface for us. There's some spectacular behind the scenes footage.
I'm excited to see that. Let's just move into Gil and the film Whole. Gil, tell us a little bit about yourself and how Whole came about.
Oh, sorry. I've got a mysterious alarm. Sorry? I
hear a duck.
Yeah, sorry, that was an alarm. That I know you said no phone alarms. I thought I turned everything off. My apologies. I'm Gil. I'm from Vancouver, Canada. My film was actually a graduation film I made, completing my bachelor's degree in animation from Emily Carr University. I completed it over the course of 8 months, and it's partially based off of a personal experience I had around the same time, around a year or a bit around the time I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. I'm not very good at describing things, so I think that's pretty much it.
Seems to work for you visually, though. You seem to be definitely have a lot to share. I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper, but I'm also going to take a moment here to alert the audience that to ask questions, best way, I've been corrected, is to type in your questions into the chat, and we'll then call on you to ask it live. And there won't be room, unfortunately, for everyone. We're also going to make sure that everybody can get to the next screening, which starts at 8:15. Jumping right in. So Gil, so Hull, is that coming from your experience? It's of course a beautifully animated film that I think really takes visually into a lot of general experiences that might relate to anxiety and more. Can you tell us a little bit about like where those specifics came from?
I guess a lot of the film was me trying to visually represent experiences I have as an autistic person in a way that maybe other people on the spectrum could also understand, and also neurotypical people. Although my focus, of course, was to connect with other individuals on the spectrum. I guess because it's so, I personally find it really difficult to sort of filter out some of the ways that I experience the world into words or images. But so the film is sort of the culmination of that, albeit maybe a little bit negative, because that's the kind of angle I came at it with.
One could see it that way. And the symbolism of the whole. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I think the whole. Well, I don't actually know what it is. I know what it isn't. I know it's not autism. The whole's not autism. I think the best I can say about it is the whole is I guess like a choice, or like yeah, it's a choice.
Interesting. Now we all want to watch it again, right? You have 24 hours, I believe. I'm gonna move backwards now with the order that I did before and talk to the folks from Revel in Your Body. Alice, starting with you, and of course, Laurel, feel free to add in. You guys have been doing good back and forth. Tell us a little bit. So this was, first of all, it's a beautiful film. I think you succeeded. The trampoline worked, and the first time I was watching it, of course, I was like, how is this happening? How are they doing this? How are they grabbing this? And it came out really just like a spectacular visual. And then when I realized, oh, trampolines, I thought, like, okay, that is so dangerous. That is such a wild idea. And did you come in thinking, okay, we're just going to get on the trampoline and capture what we can in wheelchairs, or was there more to that?
A lot happened for us, and Laurel and I like to plan. Laurel in particular is often has a good plan, and I'll be like the wild card on some of that. But I think the first question for us was really like, how do we make it bounce? So that was a real question. Like, how do we actually make the thing bounce? And then the second question was, okay, now we can make it bounce. How high can we go? And then literally the question was really about what, beyond the notion of spectacular, how do we inhabit the environment of the air and the environment of the parking deck and the environment of the campus? And so these questions permeated the film versus like, oh, the spectacular of bouncing in a wheelchair on there. So really, it was a real process of site-specific discovery, and there's a really long tradition in dance film for that. Laurel?
As Alice said, one of the reasons that the trampoline is not featured prominently in the film itself is that it's not about the fact that, yes, we're bouncing on a trampoline. We knew that as dancers, there are so many things that we create by technique that go by too fast for the audience to consciously register. So we knew these nuances of how you open the chest, how you turn a head, the ways that we go in and out of a lot of the partnering that we do. Those are the things that as dancers we find really fascinating. And Catherine Helen Fisher, not only a director and filmmaker, also a dancer, has that eye. So even without, we did not go in with a script, we didn't really even go in with a solid shot list, because we were in this process all the way throughout filming of finding this embodiment and this inhabitation. But we were aiming really at this kind of process and showing, very deliberately showing these in-betweens, these things that we as technical dancers know, but very few people are conscious of having seen us do. So it was those things, those small moments that we really wanted to share. And I think we succeeded.
Yeah. Definitely. And the title, Revel in Your Body, I feel like we could have called, there's a few of your films that we could have used that title for, but it fits to this one perfectly. Where'd that come from?
That one, I think, came from Lisa. We were at a table in a really long meeting about, you know, what was going to happen around a certain production or a certain performance, and how we market it and how would we advertise it. And I think Lisa just jumped up from a chair and said, revel in your body. And I think there's something deeply true for us. There is a tremendous amount of joy in our work and joy in our bodies. But also behind that is a recognition of the political message about what does it mean to actually revel in a disabled body, you know? Not just be there despite it or be there because of it, but to really be there in it and to explicitly take joy and pleasure and to communicate and share that joy and pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you. I want to move over to Steven Fraser and what it feels like. So also, I love the flip animation, and I thought that was extremely effective. And also engaging in a topic of hearing voices is not something that's treated in a serious way, which I think your film did. And bringing this, it's so important to bring this to light. What were your hopes for the impact with this film? What do you want an audience member to leave with? And also, did you hesitate at all before bringing this all up?
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to show, like, a lot of times when like voice hearing or psychosis is shown in like film or any sort of media, it's usually like a negative. It's usually like a serial killer or some sort of, you know, like negative representation. So I want people to watch the film and go away with recognizing it as something that's a bit more normal, a bit more, you know, like an everyday experience for some people, but not a negative experience. So yeah, so that's kind of really what I want people to go away with. And I think for me, just like after having speaking to people with similar, you know, experience similar thing to me, and yeah, it gave me a bit more confidence to talk about it and to yeah, just tell the story really. So yeah, when I realized that other people had similar experiences, that was, yeah, really beneficial to me.
I think it does. You found a way to make it very accessible, and tell us a little bit more about the flip animation, how you achieved and how that's made, and the process with that.
Yeah, so so in each box there's like a spindle, and attached to the spindle there's like 24 cards. So when the spindle turns, it creates like a 24 frame animation. So I'll go on here, you can see it. So when you turn spindle.
I don't think I realized that that was that you were. I thought you were using like a digital animation. I think at that
No,
point.
no, it's all handmade. So yeah, so there's like 24 cards, and when you spin, it just creates like an animation cycle. So yeah, so I'd used them before in like an art installation, but I never used them to tell like a story. So yeah, I just kind of had the idea and felt that like the box would work well.
Wonderful. Quinn. So Fort Irwin, there's a lot to talk about too. There's this is first of all PTSD and films about our military, or stories that we look for actually every year, I'd say. And PTSD is a topic that we very much want to bring up in ReelAbilities. And I wanted to know from you a little bit more. So we got a little bit about the process, but to how this film actually, first of all, I want to know how you casted it. And actually also getting inside the head, you yourself are not, I don't know if if you have a military background or
I do not.
from post-traumatic stress disorder, but I would love to hear how you really got into that head, because I feel it's extremely effective in your film.
Thank you. I think both questions are kind of related, because I very much came at the film as an outsider. Like I do not suffer from PTSD, and I did not serve in the military. So I think we interviewed a lot of veterans. We auditioned a lot of veterans and interviewed a lot of veterans, as well as auditioned amputees who had no military experience. But in my discussions with the veterans, I was very interested in I feel like PTSD is often portrayed very violently. Like it's portrayed in violent negative outbursts, like someone punching a hole in a wall or having some sort of very scary reaction. And I spoke to a lot of veterans who just described it more as kind of a sense of fear, a sense of constant fear that was less of like a force of kinetic violence and more of just like feeling helpless. So I was very interested in depicting a more passive portrayal of someone's performance of PTSD. And then there's a group in Los Angeles called ReelAbilities. They represent amputee actors. So we reached out to them and we auditioned quite a few amputee actors. We cast Christian in particular because I felt like it was his first time acting, but he had he was very kind and warm and had like a very comforting presence that I also think went against a lot of the ways that soldiers with PTSD are often depicted. So I think the whole film was I approached it almost like a documentary. So every discovery and surprise I think I tried to integrate it into the film, because that seemed to be the most honest way of doing it.
Once again, very effective, and I think an impactful and important film that takes it also in a new direction. I've seen quite a few films about PTSD, and this one definitely gave it a new light, and I don't feel it was too spoon-fed either.
Thank you.
Just because we're short for time, I want to ask you all one last question, and then we're going to open it to questions from the audience. I want to know what you're working on next. Let's start from the middle. Let's start with Alice. How's that? Yep, that's you, Alice.
Oh, right. Sorry, misheard you. Laurel and I are deep in preparing our new dance piece, which will also have a filmic element. And if you thought the trampoline was one thing, we're flying. Laurel?
I don't think there's much to add. Yeah, we, from whatever time we can physically be in residency together again, we will pretty much have our whole crew full-time until we can put this piece on stage and gather people in performance again.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing it. Steven, what do you got coming up next?
Yeah, I'm working on another documentary that's actually about autism and people who are LGBT, and it's about how they come out to people as being LGBT, but also how they come out to people as being autistic. So it's like kind of looking at a link between those two things.
That's come up today already, interesting, in one of our other conversations. Great, we look forward to seeing you here again, hopefully. Let's go to Gil. I'm mixing it up.
I'm actually not really working on anything specific. I mean, the film I made 2 years ago, so I've done a couple things since. I'm in a animation collective called Flavor Cell. We've made a couple music videos and stuff like that. I also make zines. I do a lot of illustration. Actually, interesting that the last comment was about LGBT people on the spectrum, because I'm also I'm a gay trans person on the spectrum. I make a lot of zines about that experience and stuff. Yeah.
Quinn. He needs to be unmuted. If Matt or Yara can unmute.
Sorry, my internet dropped out.
No problem.
Can you hear me?
We hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just directed a horror short about forensic sculpting, which might play on TV in October. And then I've been making a documentary about the wildfires in California for the last couple of years that I think should end up being a short film.
Cool, cool. We have a few questions from our audience. Yara, you want to hand it over?
Yeah, sure. This question is just for Quinn. Can you help us understand how you mentioned how you found out that kind of putting the amputees back in these battlefield training missions actually helps with their PTSD. As I would think it would be a constant re-trigger for their PTSD, and that it would be detrimental to it. So I'd love to hear from you just kind of why that is.
Yeah, I by no means am I a psychiatrist or understand the nuances of immersion therapy, but I spoke to one former Marine who the way he described it to me was like, by constantly reenacting the loss of his limb, it kind of like replaced the memory. It replaced the real memory with these artificial scenarios he was constantly put in. And the scenarios themselves, he said, were like very almost like fun and absurd and clumsy. So like all of his negative direct memory was replaced by like these experiences with people that he knew in these simulations.
Fascinating. We have another question.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me? Hi, Isaac.
Hey there.
My question is for Alice and Laurel. How did you guys meet and start dancing together? Where can we see other films you danced? Because that's more. It was amazing.
Thank you. So we met on the internet. As you might imagine, there is not a huge community of professional disabled dancers in the world. So at least eventually, most of us know each other. I began dancing professionally in 2004, shortly before Alice, and I tried to make a practice of reaching out to people, as then the field was much smaller than it even is now. We talked online. Eventually we met. I think we always knew that we would have work to make together, and it just took years as we trained and performed and grew separately as artists until one day I showed up at Alice's house for a vacation, and there are books about Rodin open on every surface.
Yeah. Some vacation.
And so Descent was born, which became a Kinetic Light project. Yeah, other films. We work primarily for the live concert stage. And you can see Kinetic Light on tour. Follow us on social. We have a lot of kind of studio clips there. Hopefully there will be more films in the future. Alice?
What you said.
I will say, if you want to see us flying, check our Instagrams. Wheelchair Dancer without the R for Alice, and Worlds of Laurel for myself. There's some good stuff.
I'm just going to add here that our next film, Our Time Machine, is starting now. For those of you who like to stick with our schedule, usually we give about a 10-minute break in between each film and conversation, so you have a couple of more minutes, but get ready for that, and I think that gives us the opportunity to take 2 more questions.
Okay, I think, hi. So I'm Morgan, I work with the festival. I've probably emailed a lot of you who needed help trying to get into this Zoom, but I don't get asked the filmmakers a lot of questions. So this was kind of mostly for Quinn, but I also actually would love for Gil and Steven to answer this. But so Quinn, when you cast like an actual veteran who was an amputee in your film, it seemed to kind of start blending like elements of kind of fiction filmmaking along with nonfiction or documentary filmmaking. You answered this a little bit before, but I'd love to know like what kind of led to that decision in terms of like blending these things together instead of something that felt more like a traditional documentary, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. And then just for Gil and Steven also, like you kind of blended your personal experience into a something either more collective for Steven or something that was kind of had an animated fiction film for Gil. But yeah, I guess Quinn start and then we can go to Gil and Steven.
Thank you. I made a film beforehand that kind of blended narrative and documentary, so I was always interested. It was about a UFO festival, a real UFO festival, and the film was about an alien visiting the UFO festival. So I've always been kind of interested in blending the two. But I would say that for Fort Irwin in particular, like the actual when you go witness the training exercises, it feels like a combination between a movie and real life, if that makes sense. Like it's such a constructed theatrical, like Hollywood, like there's a lot of overlap between special effects people who work in Hollywood and the people who put on these military simulations. So it already felt kind of like an uncanny combination of movies and reality. So that was definitely with the tone. And then I just felt it would be more authentic and honest to just cast a amputee veteran.
Gil, do you want to start?
Sure. So could I ask for the question again?
Yeah. I was kind of curious with you, like your film blends like this personal element, of course, like with like a more like you kind of have the metaphor of the whole, and you know, animation itself, I mean, is used in documentary a lot now, but I guess like what was your process in deciding to do something that kind of did have that metaphor of the whole rather than just maybe like animating like something like that's very direct from your experience?
I think I mean, with animation, I've really always been really drawn to things that to animated films that sort of play with reality in that way, and I really wanted to try it for myself. I think most of the things I do, most of the animated, at least narrative stuff I do, kind of play with the sort of like spectrum of reality and unreality. That I made a film before whole called Super Stop that was in my third year at Emily Carr, and it's about somebody who has a sort of psychedelic experience looking at one of those liquid cheese dispensers in a convenience store. So that kind of thing has always been, I think, more funny to me to make jokes about it and not have it be directly making jokes about like a traumatic experience. I'm not sure if I'm making sense. I'm kind of jumping around, but I think that's why I chose to have it be more of a fictional narrative with sort of, I guess,
Cool.
fantasy elements.
Mm-hmm.
Steven, I think you were left on this one.
Yeah, sure. I think for me, like a lot of the feelings and a lot of the emotion that I wanted to come across in the film, I had to show an animation because I don't think, if it was just like a talking heads explaining it, it wouldn't have really shown really what it feels like, and that's where the title comes from. So yeah, so I think like animation was definitely the best way to show the emotions and the feelings that the people and the voices in the film have. So yeah, and from my own experience as well, I definitely felt as if, I could write it down and I could say it out loud, but to actually show it through animation, it was definitely more powerful and more visual and more exciting to look at as well. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
I want to say about all the films that I'm noticing that they're all about very specific circumstances and very personal circumstances, and yet the storytelling, this is the power of film, makes them relevant, I feel, to absolutely anyone, and anyone can connect to these films and find their place in these experiences. And I think that's really something amazing about humanity, that we can all connect on that level. Thank you all. I want to thank all of our filmmakers. Thank you for being here. I know it's very late at night for some of you. And I want to thank our audiences for joining us for all the short films today, but especially this conversation. As mentioned, we have our next film starting right now, and our Time Machine. And then tomorrow we have, starting at noon, The Witch Hunters. Then at 2:30, Don't Foil My Plans. 4:30, we have a panel on beauty, self-advocacy, and disability, a cultural examination. 6 p.m., Expressions Through Art, another panel on our art exhibit that we had up and unfortunately is not available to the public at the moment. And that's at the Marlene Meyerson JCC. And then we'll be closing the night at 7:30 p.m. with Amy's Victory Dance. And of course, join us Monday for closing night, a conversation with Judith Heumann, and then also the film Bedlam. We look forward to seeing you. Please spread the word. And too many people are stuck in their Netflix. They should take a break and see these amazing films. Thank you all, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.